hypothetically, I think that, the comparison to an American system in this case, I would say is interesting. I don't think it's necessarily the answer. I'd have to think more about it, but I think it's interesting.
Seth, how do the kind of American sports fans feel about the way sports is kind of set up, the way you're talking there about sharing the profits and things like that? Is it genuinely seen as a positive, or do some fans get frustrated, maybe look at the type of model we have and they maybe want their teams to be more consistent and be able to stretch ahead of other teams, or is everybody quite happy with the fact there's a kind of level playing field?
It's funny because it's just more of the contradictory nature of America. People want socialism in their sports, even if they don't want it in their lives, right? So, or in their politics. They, in general, American sports fans, they hate, the clubs and the teams that are viewed as, the big boys with all the resources. And, the best example is the New York Yankees, right? The distribution of resources is a bit more skewed in Major League Baseball. And people, especially in middle America and from smaller markets, sports markets, they really hate the Yankees. They hate them, right? And it's because they're viewed as, this kind of giant money pit, sucking up all the best players in their prime, right? And winning, a lot, although not so much recently. But so I think that the fans view it as, first of all, status quo, that there should be this kind of equality and level playing field, and they're very happy with it. Yeah.
Good stuff, Seth. Just kind of final bit on Celtic, unless anyone else has any other points, but just obviously the transfer market is open. We've talked in past podcasts about possible signings, the kind of rumours that are doing their turns over the last few days are, first of all, we get Commons and the contract signings and the talks going on there. He's actually came on to a bit of form, Commons. We've maybe been we haven't been as big as fans this season, although he's done fantastically for his last season. He's clearly a good player, but he doesn't seem to be doing it under Ronnie. What are our thoughts? Should we be doing our best to sign Commons? 2 years, is that too much?
See, to be honest, I think we can sum up Commons quite easily. Earlier in the season, his form was poor. He had a very good game against Kilmarnock, and if he continues to show that form, I'd have him in before Callum McGregor. There's no big... I think the issue's been overcomplicated. He was very poor in part for a lot of games this season. If he shows the form he did against Kilmarnock, although he didn't score, if he continues to show that sort of form and some of the stuff we've seen of him previously, then he merits his place in the team. Looking at it from the games we watched, we've criticised him because he hasn't been good. Now we're doing the same with McGregor. The guy shouldn't be in the team. If Commons is playing well, he goes in before him. If he continues with that form, I wouldn't be against him getting a 2-year contract. But in terms of how consistent he is, I know that I've got the feeling Commons won't be consistent, and that's why if he left, I still wouldn't be too concerned.
2 years at one of the top wages at the club, Ciaran. Can we afford to pay Chris Commons, assuming his last year isn't that good and he isn't playing? Can we afford to pay him those wages, or do you think we should?
Well, I think we can afford to pay him the wages if he keeps the form going and he's going to play for most of the games for both seasons. But there's the gamble that he might not play a lot of the games. I think there's another issue as well, is he doesn't fit into the mould that Dyla wants of a player, where his fitness, he's going to be able to last 90 minutes. You see the improvement with Johansson. Johansson in the last minute can still burst 30, 40 yards. So there's that whole fitness aspect, which Commons doesn't seem to have. If I will have either. But if you give him the 2 years and he is on, like you said, high wages, it's a gamble that he could end up playing half the season. So you're just wasting all that money for someone sitting in half the bench. When, like Chris says, we're not going to miss him if he goes, because the team are performing without him at times as well.
It's the consistency for me.
I think you're never going to get the Chris Commons from last season ever again. I think every year from now on, there's going to be a diminishing return. I think if Chris Commons wanted to be part of the squad, he could play a good role in it. But it wouldn't be a team built around Chris Commons. It would be a squad where he's used not every game, but he's used in certain game and in certain ways. That's purely from, on the pitch perspective. I think the point's made there, he doesn't really fit the mold of your stereotypical style of player in that system. That doesn't mean he can't be used pragmatically once in a while. His fitness is an issue, both in terms of how old he is, his injury record, and I don't think he's the most naturally fit player anyway. And also, on the third one, is more, you do hear a lot of people, or report from, leaking and discontent from some people in the squad. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I don't think I'm, taking a big gamble to say a lot of that is probably coming from Chris Commons as well. I think put all those together, I wouldn't hesitate in just not giving him a contract, especially if you can get money for him in this window. You can bring in somebody else. It does depend on who you replace him with. I think if he goes, there is a gap in the squad, and you have to bring in somebody that is going to be an improvement on him or fit the system better. But if it was up to me, I would let him go.
I think if Guidetti starts scoring again, there'll be less discontent amongst the fans, because one of the big things that we're missing is his goals from last season.
Yeah.
And for a large period, Guidetti was filling that gap. If he starts to fill that gap again, then it's up to Commons to play his way back into the team. We're not going to miss him as much as is apparent goals-wise. So if Guidetti hits form again, people are going to be less inclined to want Commons in the team unless he's playing really well, if you know what I mean.
I think it's a test of what kind of club Celtic wants to be now. If they want to be smart, if they want to be rational, they can't afford to bring Chris Commons in on big wages and having him not performing ultimately. So it's an interesting topic to say, if this is a club now is governed by, say, it's a cliche, but the Moneyball principle, you let Chris Commons go now.
Sorry, just to say sorry, Louis, I'm jumping in again.
You're all right.
But that's something that's hampered us in the past with O'Neill giving guys like Baldy and Sutton big wages and contracts that lasted past his tenure at the club. I don't think that's a road we want to go down again. You don't reward guys for their previous endeavours. You reward them based on what they can do at that point. And if Commons,
no emotion.
Exactly. Make it cold. And if Commons, the Kilmarnock game, he was fantastic. If he can consistently play at that form, I would have no hesitation giving a contract. I don't think he can or he will. So I'm with Christian. I wouldn't be too bothered.
I was actually going to make that point.
Ha ha.
Thanks very much. I think Celtic have been stung with it in the past, as you say, giving people contracts and then them kind of not getting value for money in terms of the player either being too old or just kind of the player kind of fading into obscurity on a big contract. I don't think Celtic will do that again. It would go against everything that they've been doing for the last kind of year and a half, 2 years. I just can't see it. So I don't think he'll get a 2-year contract no matter what. I just don't think he's going to get it. I think he could get a 1-year contract. I think he's a luxury player who, as Christian said, he would be used kind of sporadically. And he's a great luxury player to have. But at the same time, last season he scored so many goals because, one, we didn't have a striker because Gary Hooper had left. We couldn't replace him no matter how much we tried getting other players in. It wasn't working. And another thing, Chris Commons was very, very greedy. He scored a lot of goals. And now it seems kind of daft to say he was greedy, but and kind of criticise him for scoring goals. I don't mean it like that, but he didn't kind of fit into the team. I felt as if there was a lot of times when Chris Commons was shooting for his own sake rather than because it was a great opportunity for the team. And I think a lot of the time he was played so high up the pitch. For a guy who was a midfielder, he became a striker at that point when we really needed something. And so that kind of type, I don't see having such a key role in a squad or a kind of team ethic that Dyla wants. He wants it to be a team. No individuals, no one's bigger or better than the overall group. And I can't really see that with Commons. I like the guy. I would probably be happy if he got another 1 year deal, but it's got to be on the club's terms, not his terms.
Yeah, just a quick point as well. When you say about Chris Commons, his long range shooting, I wonder if Seth has ever done any sort of analysis on where Chris Commons shoots from, because I know one of the graphs that really opened my eyes to stats in general was in terms of how big how little a percentage of goals, or shots from outside the box actually goes in, and how increased if you take a shot from inside the box, the percentage of those shots that turn into a goal is so much more. So you see players, I think Andros Townsend is probably the most obvious example, who just goes inside and shoots from 25 yards, and if it's vaguely close, the commentators on TV gives him loads of praise, where he probably should have passed it and created a better chance as well. I think Commons when I see Commons play, I see a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's he takes a lot of shots outside the box, but he can do that because he's a really good shooter. He makes up for the low probability of scoring from outside the box. He with his own talent is able to mitigate that a little bit, but it's not ideal. That's not where you want to be shooting from. You want to be shooting from inside the box. The front four configuration that Dial is using is geared towards having attacking midfielders getting into the box, not shooting from outside the box, or else what's the point of that type of setup, right? So I think that for me, like, I like Commons because he shoots a lot, and I think he's got a great shot on him. But his liabilities are, they negate that somewhat, and his age is too advanced, to make that kind of investment in for me. We're not going to build a team around him. He's not good as a sub. When you are a shooter like he is, you have to come on and start so you can get into the game, warm up, and find your legs, right? As a sub, I don't think he's very effective. So if we're not going to start him, then I don't think we should keep him around. And the thing is that if Stefan Johansson could shoot like Chris Commons can, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
I don't think we would have him.
Yeah, he wouldn't be at Celtic, I was going to say.
Exactly. He wouldn't even be at Celtic. But that's the point. It's like we're trying to, and I think that's kind of what happened with maybe partly what Ronnie was trying at Kilmarnock was like, okay, Johansson is tremendous defensively and with his decision-making, and Chris really knows how to shoot, and let's put them together and see what happens. How much of the chances, like everyone's saying, oh, Chris Commons after the Kilmarnock match, like why isn't he playing more? What I wonder is how much of his success, at least in creating chances, was a consequence of the other guys playing around him, because it's typically they've not played in that configuration where they were both in that attacking midfield position, both Johansson and Chris Commons. But Johansson is the kind of person that you build a team around, not Chris Commons. And that's what the Ronnie Dyla's project is not about this year, right? It's about building a team into the future.